Let's talk about area of rectangles and parallelograms. But before I look at the figures, let me go what area is. Area in reality is how many squares can we fit in the shape. Usually kitchens, when you guys go to your kitchen, usually kitchens have squares on the floor. Usually. So you guys can count. Like if I ask you what's the area of the kitchen and you guys can see the squares, you guys can just count them out. You guys can just count them and then that will be your area. When I look at a rectangle, let's say we go with this rectangle, and I'm gonna say this rectangle, let me separate it into squares. I'm gonna say it's a 3 by 5 rectangle. I say 3 on one side and 5 on the other. You guys can see the squares. Again, we can just count them, right? It will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So I'll say the area is 15, right? I can just count them. Another way we could have done this, we could have just added, there's 3 here, plus another 3 here, plus another 3 here, plus another 3, and another 3. Right now, 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is also 15. That's another way we could have done this. Now, to make it easier, back in the days, we came and we said, rectangles, it seems like I'm adding the same number. Notice I added the 3. I added the same number multiple times. Like, there's a shortcut. There's a shortcut for that. When we add the same number over and over and over, it is easier to just multiply it. So for this example, we could have just said 3 times 5, and that would have given us the 15 easier. Okay, so that's exactly what we're gonna do with a rectangle. I'm gonna see the two measurements that meet at a corner. Notice how I chose, in this case, this corner. It was made by 3 and 5. I just multiply those two numbers, and that basically gave me the area. So let's take a look at question number 1. It says find the area of each. I'm going to find a corner. In fact, the corners that I'm interested in for many figures, not just rectangles, for many figures, the corner that I'm interested in is a 90-degree corner. And I'm going to mark it with the little red box. Okay, now for rectangle, I have many choices, right? So just to pick one corner, I'm going to pick this corner. It is made by the measurement 12 and 11.3. You guys see how those are the measurements that make that corner. So for the area of this rectangle, let me go 12 times 11.3. And I'm going to use a calculator if necessary. In my case, it gives me 135.6. Now, be careful in the instructions. Notice I just said find the area of each. I never said rounded to anything. So look at the instructions. I might not say rounded. So if I don't say anything about rounding, don't round. Just give me the whole answer. Now, if I do say something about rounding, then they do round it to the number I specify. So when it comes to area, sometimes we want it to be rounded, sometimes we don't. Okay, so once again, always be careful with instructions. If it doesn't say anything about rounding, then do not round. Okay. Now, some people might come and say, how about the measurements? How about the measurements? Well, this was basically feet, right? 12 feet. This was basically feet, 11.3 feet. So feet times feet. Remember back in the days, if I had like x times x, you would call this x squared because you added the exponents. The same thing with the measurements. Here will be feet to the second, which people call square feet. So this is 135.6 square feet. Okay, now for my assignment, I believe measurement, you guys understand measurements. More than anything, I'm worried about whether you know how to do the numbers, whether you know how to get the answer. So don't worry about the measurement. Don't worry about feet squared. Just the number, 135.6. All right, let's take a look at question number 2. I'm going to pick a corner. It doesn't matter which one. This case, I'm going to pick this corner again. It's made by the measurements 3 and 3. So I'm just going to go 3 times 3, which gives me 9. Okay, so pick a corner, 90-degree corner. With rectangles, you got choices, and you're going to multiply the two numbers that meet at that corner. Now, with parallelograms, this type of shapes right here, let me take a look at something. Let me show you guys something really cool. Now, here I have a parallelogram. You guys look, it looks like a slanted rectangle. Now, the interesting part of the parallelogram, if I count this measurement on the top, right, I can count the squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm gonna say this side is 10. Now, the slanted measurement, I cannot count it. However, I can count the height. I can count the height of my parallelogram. It is 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna say the height of it is 4. Now, I know how to get the areas of a rectangle. Now, for parallelograms, let me do something really, really cool. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it into separate pieces. You guys see the yellow one and the green one. Basically, I want a triangle on the left side because I'm creating a 90-degree corner here. I'm creating a 90-degree corner. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to move the triangle from the left. I'm going to move it to the right. Okay. If you guys see this, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's a 4x4 rectangle. So it fits perfectly here. You guys see it? Gonna fit perfectly there. So again, I'm gonna cut the triangle from the left side and I'm gonna move it to the right side. Boom, it's right there. You guys see it? Now guess what? I have a rectangle. Now this rectangle, as you guys can see it, I'm gonna draw here. I have my rectangle. It's a 10x4 rectangle. So what I'm gonna do with parallelograms, right? We have a parallelogram here. What I'm gonna do with my parallelograms is I'm gonna treat them like rectangles. So let's go back to our work here. And I said, what I'm gonna do with parallelograms, I'm gonna treat them like rectangles. And I know for questions 1 and 2, I said there's one corner that it is important. It is the corner that it has a 90-degree angle. So in this case, question number 3, I see my 90-degree angle here. I gotta see what are the measurements. What are the measurements that make the 90-degree corner? I see 10.3. That's one measurement, and 6.7. That's the other measurement. So all I have to do, I'm gonna go 10.3 times 7.7. Use a calculator if you need to, and I'm gonna get 69.01. Now, you guys might be wondering, what are we going to do with this 7.7? Remember on the figure before, the figure that I just showed you earlier, let me come back to the figure. Remember when I had a parallelogram like this, my slanted measurements, I never used. Now, when we go back to our homework, the 7.7, those are the slanted measurements. I'm not going to use those. I'm just looking at the two numbers that make the 90-degree corner. Nice. Now let's take a look at number 4. Look for your 90-degree angle. Okay. Now this thing, I see these dotted lines because a 90-degree angle, it is made outside of my parallelogram. Now that's why my book is going to use these little dots. This dotted line is just for me to know that the 90-degree angle, it is outside of my figure. Now, what are the two measurements that make this figure, this angle? 9, that's the height of the parallelogram, and this 11. Because the 11 doesn't reach, that's why they extended with the dotted line, but it is the base 11. So what I'm going to do for my area here, let me go 9 times 11, which happens to be 99. Okay, 9 times 11. Now, the reason why we call this a parallelogram, again, it looks like a slanted rectangle. The reason why we call this parallelogram is because the top side, let me do this with a highlighter. The top side with the bottom side are parallel, and then the left side with the right side are also parallel. So that's what we call the parallelogram. But again, what you're looking for is the 90-degree angle. All right, let's take a look at questions 5 and 6. It says, find the missing measurement. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, so now I'm rounding. Now I'm going to be rounding to the nearest tenth. Okay, because it ends on TH, I know it is a decimal. 10 sounds like a 1 with 1 0. Okay, now because it's a 1 with 1 0, that means 1 decimal place. If I said hundredth, 100 sounds like 100, which is a 1 with 2 zeros, then that will be 2 decimal places. Okay, now looking at this one, okay, let me choose a 90-degree corner. So I'm gonna go this one. It is made by this measurement. I don't know what this measurement is, right? It has a question mark, but I remember back in algebra, we learned that when we don't know something, we replace it with a letter. So let me call this X. And then looking at my 90-degree corner is made also by 11.8. So if I go 11.8 times X, because I'm multiplying the two measurements that meet at the 90-degree corner, 11.8 times X, that's going to give me the area. And I know the area, it's 129.8. So 108 and 11.8 times X is equal to 129.8. Well, I can easily solve for X, right? Let me divide both sides by 11.8. That gives me my X by itself. Now use a calculator if necessary. 129.8 divided by 11.8 gives me 11. I know at the beginning it was an X. It was a question mark, but I call it X because I did not know how big it was. Okay, that's not bad. Let's take a look at number 6. We have a parallelogram here. I see a question mark, and again, I'm going to call that X. My 90-degree corner is made by X and 10.9. So I'm going to go 10.9 times X is equal to the area, but I know the area is 98.1. So to get X by itself, let me divide both sides by 10.9. That's how I get the X by itself. Now 98.1 divided by 10.9 happens to be 9. Okay, none of my answers came in decimals. Some of your answers might. If you have decimals, round it to 1 decimal place.